It's great to have you with us from wherever you're tuning in from. For more information about Elevate Church or to contact us, head to our website elevatechurch.me and take us wherever you go by downloading our Elevate Church AU app. We hope this message inspires and helps you to take your next steps in your journey.
Well, good morning. Good to see you all. Last year in November, we had a board meeting, and one of our board members, Liz, who's leading in Elevate Kids this morning, said to me, "Mark, I think you need to go away." And I'm like, wait, what? But I think she meant like take a break. At least that's what I told myself anyway. And the reason I shared that, last week I had the privilege of being in Melbourne and preaching at Gateway Church. Gateway is a church of very good friends of ours. I've been part of their teaching team for 20 years now. And then Jacob, who's part of their teaching team in church, if you were here last week, he preached here virtually. But it was my first time preaching there live since 2015. I've done a lot of video messages, which is like, here's some of their church, didn't know I had legs. So they got to see my legs, and it was great. And just when I'm there, again, I don't get out much, as Liz pointed out to me. I don't go away much, but I very much represent us and what God's doing here, and take a piece of Elevate and the spirit of Elevate into the church there and get the opportunity to encourage them as well. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, but great to be back. And we're starting a new series. Now, here's the thing. Jesus, when he was on this earth, he did a lot of teaching. And one of the techniques, sort of teaching techniques, he used is a thing called parables. Now, it's just a fancy word, which essentially means like Jesus would point out or point to something that his audience were quite familiar with. They might have been sitting in a field somewhere, and he would say, look, consider the lilies. And they're like, oh, right, lilies, yeah, sure. And then he would then kind of segue over to, well, here's the kingdom principle that we can learn by way of example. One of his most famous parables is called the parable of the talents. And let me just really quickly unpack that for you. So in the parable of the talents, there's 4 people. The first one is the owner, and this is seemingly quite a wealthy individual. Then there was 3 servants. Now, the owner was going away for a period of time, and so he gave to each of his 3 servants a sum of money. He gave the first one a little bit more, the second one in between, the third one less, which you can kind of get into that, but I'm not going to get into that today. But he didn't give it to them as owners of that. He remained the owner. He entrusted that to them. And then he said, essentially, I'll be back, and then you can return, what I've entrusted to you. So off he went. The first 2, when the owner came back, were able to demonstrate to him that they'd actually invested what he'd entrusted to them and actually increased it. And he was like, all right, good job. Well done, good and faithful servant, he said to the first 2. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Very, very, very pleased. Then he looked to the third one, and, let's just say the third one took a different approach and came up with a different outcome. And the third servant said to the master, I want you to read the words that today, the words or word that's underlined out loud with me. I was afraid. Now that word or that theme, fear, like that's the reason I didn't do something, that is going to dominate today's message, and it's going to dominate this series. I was afraid. This is my very concise explanation for what I didn't do. I was afraid I might disappoint you, so I found a good hiding place and secured your money. Here it is, safe and sound, down to the last cent. Now, when you first read that story, it might sort of indicate to us that the third servant was the most responsible of the 3. Because look, at the end of the day, he gave back to the master what was entrusted to him. He didn't lose a cent. Like, here it is, exactly the same amount. I didn't take any risks. Like, come on, like those 2 clowns, things could have gone badly for them, but I didn't do that. And it's like, well, what did the master think about the third guy who didn't take any risks? Was he the most responsible of the 3? Was he the one that the other two should have actually? Well, that's not kind of what Jesus points out. The master was furious. Hello. It's fighting words. That's a terrible way to live. It's criminal to live cautiously like that. Listen, if you knew I was after the best, why did you do less than the least? Hey, look, the least you could have done would have been to invest the sum with bankers, where at least I would have got a little interest. Hey, look, here's what's going to happen now. Take the 1,000 that I entrusted to this clown and give it to the one who risked the most, and get ready to say this with me, and get rid of this play it safe who won't go out on a limb. Jesus calling you a play it safe is not a compliment. It is a very overt criticism that you, in this guy's case him, he allowed fear to have the final word on his actions. And it points to this idea that whilst the third guy didn't waste money, he wasted opportunities. You might think, well, he didn't risk anything. That's a myth. If you think he didn't risk anything, what he risked is the opportunity to not see the full power of God working in his life. That was the risk. We're going to come back to that. Now, January 2026, which wasn't that long ago, we taught a series, we launched a brand new year with a series called God Just Tell Me. And the whole series, and many of you were here for that, was all about this idea of getting more clarity around what God's will is for our lives. And we're talking about finding God's will. Now, and we're ready to go with this, we're pulling the trigger on this series, which is all about fulfilling God's will, fulfilling God's calling. Because the reality is, even if you have more clarity around what God's will is for your life, does not automatically guarantee that it's going to happen. Because we have a part to play, and one of the key parts that we have to play is being willing to take consistent steps of faith where there's no certainty, where often our only certainty is that God's good and he's going to lead us into good places. So we're going to talk a lot about that through the lens of this guy, Elisha. And Elisha, he kind of drops into the pages of history around the age of 20 years old. Okay, Blakey, that's you, my boy. 20 years old. And he was working, seems to be for his family business. That's kind of, we don't know for sure. Not really the big point anyway. But when we find him, his job is plowing with a team of oxen. Now, if I was telling you this story back when Elisha was around, I wouldn't have to explain it. You're like, oh, right, yeah, really, plowing with a team of oxen. But when's the last time you saw somebody plowing with a team of oxen? Probably not recently. So it looks like this. It looks like, by the way, we have new projectors on our list of things that we are asking God for this year. And now you know why. Imagine you can see this image. But look, the guy in the back this is oxen. Thank you. Two in front. I just thought that and it came around. Listen. This is plowing with a team of oxen. And what we're going to see, and I just want you to bake this into your brain, like at least for today, because what we're going to see is God chose a very ordinary guy doing a very, very, very ordinary job to do extraordinary things. And in fact, ultimately, God did more miracles through Elisha than anyone else in recorded history, with the exception of Jesus. So it's a pretty good silver medal to win. And I believe the same God that called Elisha is calling you and calling me for more in 2026. So this is in around when Elisha was around. This is about 9th century BC. And it was at a time when God's people, the nation of Israel, were ignoring him. They were coloring outside the lines without guardrails, and they were worshiping false gods. And time and again throughout history, in critical times, we will encounter and do encounter that in critical times, God raised up a spiritual leader or spiritual leaders. And I think you'd probably agree with me that right now we're living in some pretty critical times. Yeah? And I believe God is wanting to raise up more spiritual leaders, including you and me, in critical times. God's not just going to take his hand off the wheel and think, not quite sure what to do here. He raises up spiritual leaders. Now, this isn't the first time we've taught about Elisha. We did this series several years ago, Elisha, A Tale of Ridiculous Faith. You can go back in our podcast and listen to that. This is very much like more on that theme. So let's drop in. This is where we're going to find Elisha for the first time in recorded history in 1 Kings chapter 19. So if you've got the Bible app installed, many of you do, scan this flow code. It'll take you to 1 Kings chapter 19. We're going to use the New Living Translation. Pretty easy to follow along. Now, this is going to get confusing for a moment. So in critical times, the first spiritual leader that God raised up was a guy named Elijah. Not to be confused with Elisha. Now, I don't get it. Why don't you this guy's name's Frank and this guy's name's Brian. Like, first prophet was Frank and then Frank handed off to Brian. But no, it has to be Elijah and Elisha. Well, anyway, Elijah was the first guy, and God used Elijah to perform 12 recorded miracles. Towards the end of Elijah's time on earth, God instructed him to go and find a young guy named Elisha and effectively hand over the baton to Elisha. Like, essentially, Elisha was to become Elijah's successor and the next prophet to Israel. So, like a good obedient son, Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. Remember? Can you picture that one there? By the way, there was no Mary People Wellington boots back then. When you were standing behind, plowing through that, it was not good. It feels a little squishy today underfoot. Yeah. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field. Say this with me. And Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elijah went over to him and threw his cloak across his shoulders and then walked away. So we've already seen that Elisha had a pretty crappy job. Oh, I expected better from you there. Or was that just too much obvious? It's like, of course, it's not funny. It's obvious. It's like a dad joke, Gav. King of the dad jokes. But as much as I say that, like, oh, you did a crappy job. Oh, very cute. It's vital because we're going to see that God used Elisha incredibly in his lifetime, but his jump-off point was he was in a field plowing behind some oxen. And by the way, he wasn't in the first team. He wasn't in the second team. He wasn't even in the third team. He was in the 12th team. God has a remarkable habit of bypassing the so-called obvious choices and walking past the first team and the second team and the third team. And he can find you even if you feel like you're stuck in obscurity in the 12th team. Because God notices. He has not lost your number. He hadn't lost Elisha's number. All the dudes in the first 11 teams see this guy going past thinking, picks the guy from the 12th team. If you feel like metaphorically you're in the 12th team, not only are you not discounted from God choosing you, I would put it to you, you might actually be perfectly positioned for God to choose you. Thank you. I'm glad some amening's happening today. I feel like I'm in church. The first thing that we see about Elisha that makes him and made him perfectly positioned for God choosing him is he was the poster child for faithfulness. He showed up every day to do that job. Hello? Consistently showing up day after day, doing the small things, the hard things, the unglamorous things, the not Instagrammable things, things that some other people might feel are below them. That perfectly positions you to be chosen by God, because God knows he can trust you with something valuable based on how much you value what doesn't seem to be valuable, because God's more interested in your character than your calling. He's more interested in your consistency than your career. Brilliant. Hello? End of last year, last Sunday of the year, we did a thing called Elevate Wrapped. I said it then, I'm going to repeat it today. I've been in church leadership in various ways for 30 years. And right now, I'm in a stage of life where I'm far more impressed with consistency than I am with talent. Because anyone can be brilliant for 5 minutes. I'm looking for people that are brilliant for 5 years, and we've got a lot of people in our church, well, actually not a lot, a handful of people in our church who have been brilliant for over 5 decades. That impresses me more than 5 minutes, right? Because I'm convinced God is looking for enduring stars, not shooting stars. You don't believe me? All right. Here we go. When I think of enduring stars, these are just a few that come to mind because I'm so smart. The Milky Way, heard of that? Yes. It's an enduring star. Orion's Belt, heard of that? It's an enduring star. The Southern Cross, Australian people, it's an enduring star. Hit me with the name of one shooting star. Ready? I'll be waiting. You can't think of any? Of course not, because nobody's impressed with shooting stars after 5 seconds. Elisha was not a shooting star. He was an enduring star, and that positioned him, because God's looking for availability over ability. You can have, listen, tell your kids this, Bex, you can have just as much physical talent locked up in your body as Michael Jordan did. But if you don't show up to the practice court and you don't show up on game day, if you're just at home playing your PS5, that talent means nothing. Yeah, that's right. It's availability over ability every single time. Yep, so true. So Elisha went over to Elijah. I told you, this is crazy. Brian went over to Frank and threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then that's if I was God, that would, anyway. Threw his cloak around him. So this cloak wasn't just like an ordinary garment. It was literally like the cloak of the prophet. And he just in that brief exchange, Elijah was demonstrating to Elisha, God sees you. God values you. God has got great things for you. I am now passing over the spiritual authority that God had entrusted to me, because my time's coming to an end, and God's instructed me to pass it off to you. You now have the spiritual authority, which sounds great, right? But Elisha now has a decision to make, because this was not on the list when he got up in the morning. He just thought he was going to get up, get behind the oxen, plow some fields, and at the end of the day go back home, just like the day before and the day before that. This was unexpected. He could have said, nah. And you're like, what? Why on earth would he do that? I'll tell you what, because and just stick with plowing. Yeah, I'll tell you why he might have considered that. Because it was familiar. It was predictable. It was comfortable. He could have chosen, listen, to play it safe. I mean, he was making a living. Like, just keep doing that. Or, the other option that's on the table is take a risk. But the point is, in this moment in history, Elijah could have chosen safe, familiar, comfortable, we wouldn't have even read about him ever, let alone what we're going to learn about him in his lifetime. And I'm going to repeat what I riffed on at the top. It's a mistake to think playing it safe is the same as avoiding risk. The risk in playing it safe is you won't see God's miraculous power at work in and through your life. Fortunately, say this with me, Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran after Elijah and said to him, first, let me go and kiss my mother, goodbye, then I'll go with you. Now, as a spiritual leader, one of the most important things to me is to look and see whether people, that's including you, are growing in their faith. All right? So here's a question. Just answer it for yourself. If you were to have to sort of like make an assessment of whether someone's growing in their faith, what would be like one of the metrics that you would choose? Like, how do you measure that, right? You know, now you could say, I know, the number of Bible verses that someone's memorized. Like, the more you memorize, probably they're growing their faith. And I encourage people to read the Bible more, to memorize more of the Bible, because here's the thing, you can't live out God's promises if, first of all, you don't know what they are. Hello. Secondly, God says his word it's a sword. You can use it in situations. So you got to know it. I get it. But here's what I've noticed, and I don't say this cynically. This is just like I've seen this. I know some people, and chances are you do too, that know a lot of the Bible, but are some of the meanest, most judgmental, smallest thinking people you could ever encounter. So I'm like, just knowing more of the Bible doesn't automatically translate that someone's growing spiritually. It could, but it doesn't. Or what about Sunday church attendance? Look at all of you. Of all the things you could have chosen to do this morning, you're here. Well done. Brilliant. Now, let's say you go well above the national average and you decide you're going to show up 45 Sundays a year. It's pretty good. 45 Sundays a year. Does that mean you're growing spiritually? Now, I encourage people to be here. You know, that's why board members tell me I need to go away because I'm here a lot. I encourage it, absolutely. We come together, we worship together, we encourage one another, we maybe meet some people. There's so many good reasons to come and gather together. But do you know you can turn up in a church 52 Sundays of a year and yet choose to stay in the play it safe, comfortable, familiar place and therefore not grow? So, the metric that I use is what I call lag time. And it looks like this. It's the time between when God asks you to do something and you ultimately say yes. And the shorter this gap gets, the more confident I am that you are growing spiritually. Because your faith in God is growing. Don't delay, immediately obey. Don't negotiate. Okay, God, yeah, but just surrender. And the shorter that lag time, the more confident I am that you're growing. Thankfully, did you notice, Elisha's lag time was 0. Elijah put the cloak on him, walked away, and Elisha's like, wait a minute, I'm coming too. In fact, he said, I will go with you. He didn't know where. He didn't know to do what. He never even met Elijah before. Oh, I'll go with you. And here's what I want to encourage you to adopt as a life principle. Before God even asks, whatever the blank ultimately becomes, have this as a life principle. God, it doesn't even matter what is it, I will. You know, I taught years ago this idea, God, the answer is yes. Now what's the question? It's already yes, I'm in. I'm all in. Now what's the question? I will. And in Elisha's case, go with you. But what's something that you might be thinking that God's calling you to this year to fill in the blank that God's asked you to do, and you're in that lag time now. I'll start with the big gun. Forgive that person. What? But God, you don't know what they did to me. Yeah, actually, I do. I will give that money. I will join that team. I will invite that friend to church. I will apply for that job. I will enroll in that course that I don't think I'm smart enough for. I will send that encouraging text message to that friend. I will give up that comfort. I will stretch my small thinking. I will no longer operate from fear. Hello. No details, and yet Elisha said, I will go with you. You don't have to understand completely to obey immediately. Now then something kind of bonkers happened. This is the bit where it's not that I think like Elisha was working for his family business. This is the part where I hope that he was working for his family business, because when you read this sounds kind of irresponsible if these were someone else's oxen. So Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. Ugh, really? Yeah, this is not a vegan-friendly message, people. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire and roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they were very, very happy, and they all ate. Carnivore Diet 101. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. But here's the point of this story, of this part of the story. Elisha literally burnt his backup plan. Hermano, listen to this one. I got this one for you. In 1519, that's Spanish for brother. You'll love it. In 1519, Hernan Cortez, a Spanish conquistador, had sailed from Spain to the New World, South America, with 700 other soldiers. He stood on the shores of Veracruz in Mexico as the first ever conquistador at those shores. And legend has it that he ordered his troops to burn the boats. Gave them the order. We don't know what's ahead of us. We don't know if we're going to make it, but guys, the thing that's going to incentivize us is no plan B, no backup plan, no turning back. Unfamiliar, unknowns, we're all in. Sometimes taking a hold of the new means letting go of the old. You don't get to take it with you sometimes. Sometimes taking hold of the promise requires burning the plows, the familiar, the safe. Well, if things don't work out with Elijah, I can always go back to my job. Well, not after this act of terrorism, you can't. So here's my final question as we lead into this series. What plow do you need to burn in order to fulfill what God's calling you to do? Now, one more thing, and I like to highlight this as we launch a brand new series. And I talked about reading the Bible consistently, and we've shown you the Bible app, and I highly recommend the Bible app. In the Bible app, a couple of years ago, they introduced a section called My Church. Now, if you have the Bible app, you can scan this QR code, and it'll take you to our Elevate Church's My Church section, and you can make Elevate My Church. And what we do, every Monday is we post a Bible reading plan, just a short one, 4, 5, 6 days, around the topic that we preached on the Sunday. And it gives us an opportunity, and I do these for my own journey as well. It gives us the opportunity to continue to go deeper and God show us more as well. The Bible plan that we're posting tomorrow, and we'll post a new one every week through this series on Elisha. the one that we're posting tomorrow is called How to Read the Weird Stories in the Bible. So that'll come in handy as we go through Elisha's life, because there's some stuff in Elisha's life and God gets him to do when you're like, what? So tomorrow we'll publish the featured plan, How to Read the Weird Parts of the Bible, and I'd love you to be a part of that and really make that a priority as we go through this series and then off through the year. It's free, it's brilliant. I mean, the people the church that developed this app, they didn't just throw any featured plans. So, Brian Crackpot doesn't get to put his featured plan in there. They're like, nah, this guy's a crackpot. And before we post it up, I read through the plans to make sure they're not written by Brian Crackpot and snuck through the cracks. Just can't recommend that highly enough.
We really hope you got a lot out of this message. If you live in the Perth area, we'd love for you to join one of our live experiences. For times and directions, as well as information, head to our website, elevatechurch.me. For those of you beyond the Perth area, we'd love for you to connect with our online experience, which premieres every Sunday via YouTube and Facebook Live, and on demand immediately after. And to partner with us to reach more people by giving financially, head to our website, elevatechurch.me, and also download our Elevate Church AU app.